Your phone alarm was currently the most annoying sound in the universe. You'd been having a very interesting dream, and the last thing you wanted to do was wake up to reality. You groaned, while snatching your phone off the nightstand and blinking away the glare of morning light. After getting so little sleep from going to bed so late, heading into work seemed like a bad idea, but at least it was Friday and you could sleep in tomorrow. Rubbing your eyes, you remembered everything that happened the previous night. The concert, the asshole at the bar, the conversation with Bakugou, him carrying you to your bed. That last one definitely had something to do with at least one of your dreams. At least I don't have a hangover. Thank you, water. You stood up and sifted through your drawers to find some work clothes. You were running low, so you'd need to wash a load over the weekend. Keeping your eyes open proved difficult since all you wanted to do was crawl back into bed, but you managed to find something acceptable and clean. You glanced quickly at the lump on your couch before scooting into the bathroom. Each day that passed, where Bakugou failed to return to his own world, felt like a lost opportunity when you kept your clumsy mouth shut about how you felt. If you didn't work up the courage soon, it would be too late, but nothing you could do about it when you had to get to work. It's too early for this shit. The cold shower helped you clear your mind and wake you up, but you knew you'd need at least a few cups of coffee to feel fully alert and make it through the day. After applying a bit of makeup and styling your hair, you left the bathroom with caution, careful not to wake up your sleeping roommate. Bakugou's blonde hair poked out of the blanket like a tuft of golden wheat. He looked cozy, and you hoped his sleep was better than the previous night. You wrote your usual note, grateful whenever Bakugou did the same, before walking towards the door, but you paused by the fridge. He said he made leftovers, you thought, while opening the refrigerator door as quietly as possible. Seeing the container on the top shelf, you grabbed it before you slipped out the front door with one last glance at the couch. "Good morning," you said to your elderly neighbor as she finished walking her little dog around the apartment complex. She gave you a kind smile. "Oh, good morning," she replied before gesturing you closer with a wrinkly finger. "That young man you're with, quite handsome. If I were 50 years younger." You bit your tongue to keep from laughing or gagging. You weren't quite sure which felt more appropriate. We aren't. Have a good day." Gathering up your bag, you darted off down the sidewalk. If your elderly neighbor hit on your hot roommate and you missed that memorable scene, so be it. Once you arrived at work, you hid a yawn behind your hand before pouring yourself a generous cup of coffee. Just let the caffeine kick in," you muttered while walking back to your desk. Most of the morning was spent with your headphones on, zoning out to the music as you worked. It was only after lunch that your overly nosy coworker came around to bug you about weekend plans. You honestly hadn't thought of plans. Not yet, anyway. All you really needed to do was go grocery shopping since Bakugou had eaten a majority of your food by this point. The previous weekend was so busy with the amusement park and VR games that a part of you just wanted to laze around in pajamas and do nothing. But if Bakugou was still here, you hated the idea of him feeling bored, especially since he couldn't really do anything productive or even talk to people who didn't speak Japanese while you were at work. "Nope, just staying in," you answered with a bored voice in the hopes that she'd leave you alone. Most weekends at least one person tried to drag you out to do something costly or dumb, but you blew them off every time. You really need to get out more, experience life, get laid, do something exciting. All she did was sit and play on her phone at her kids' sports games and ignore her husband in favor of any remotely attractive man she passed. Not exactly an eventful life, so she had little room to talk. But you didn't feel like starting an argument. Your life was none of her business anyway. "I assure you I'm doing just fine, thanks." She failed to pick up on your closed-off body language. Tapping her foot on the ground, she sighed. "Tell you what, you're single, and I have a friend who—" You cut her off before she could finish attempting to set you up on some terrible blind date. "No, not interested. It's time for my lunch anyway." The last thing you wanted was anyone at work trying to set you up or improve your romantic life. The jerk at the bar last night still made your nose wrinkle up in disgust. You maneuvered your way around your coworker and down the hall towards the kitchen. Food would distract you. Perfect. You opened up the container and stared at the neatly arranged assortment of rice, vegetables, and meat. Even before popping it in the microwave, it smelled delicious. "Ooh, that looks good," a different coworker quipped as he fixed his own lunch. You smiled. "Yeah, it does, thanks." As you waited for the solitary microwave on your floor to free up, your phone buzzed. Your friend texted you last night when she got home, but the whole carried off to bed by Bakugou situation prevented your brain from firing off at full capacity before you finally fell asleep. She point-blank asked if you touched his butt because of course she would. You blushed and whispered, "Oh my God," before texting back, "No," in all caps. OMG, why not? I gave you my confidence speech. Because I can't just ask, "Hey, can I touch your butt?" That's rude. No, that's asking for consent. I can barely just... I'm trying to just keep it together. Okay, send me a pic of him because this is ridiculous. At her reply, you stopped to think it through. She really wasn't into anime at all, and instead watched bad cable dramas and true crime documentaries. An interesting mix. All you knew was that you definitely didn't have a picture of the real Bakugou to send her, but it was an interesting thought. Would Bakugou let you take a picture of him? To keep to remember him by? Obviously, taking one without his consent would be weird and creepy, so you didn't want to resort to that if he said no, which he probably would. She texted back that from the way you spoke about him, his hotness level better be through the roof. "Oh, it is," you mumbled, thinking about all the instances when you secretly stared when he wasn't looking. After you grabbed your food from the microwave, you sat down and pondered about pictures before searching through Google on your phone for Japanese male model. Quite a few pictures came up, but none of them really fit Bakugou's facial structure or hair. You copied one that was similar enough, though, and sent it her way. Maybe then she'd back off and let you figure things out on your own terms. No matter how much you appreciated her advice and words of encouragement, you were an adult, and you were the one to deal with any romantic confession consequences. Like this? Sorta? But blonde and hotter? He's from Japan. What the fuck? That hunk is staying with you? Please, please, just ask him out. If you don't, I will, because WTF. Since you hadn't seen him shirtless, you, made an informed assumption on his body type. At this point, you put your phone on silent and sunk into your chair. You took a bite of food to distract you, only to hold back an embarrassing sound from how delicious it was. It tasted even better than it smelled, and it wasn't spicy enough to burn your mouth either. I'm gonna miss his cooking. The last thing you wanted to do was ruin things now that Bakugou had officially called you a friend. That in itself felt like a huge success. Your phone lit up once more, and you debated reading the screen because you already knew who it was, but you picked it up anyway with a sigh. Listen to me. I'ma just say this one last time. You better not be sitting there thinking he's out of your league or whatever, or I will come and smack you. You're gorgeous and nice and one of the hardest working people I know. At least put yourself out there. Anyone would be lucky to date you. Her words brought another smile to your face. Although the two of you didn't hang out as much as you wished, she always smothered you with positivity when you needed it most. I could hug you right now, you beautiful supportive butterfly. I'll think about it some more. Thanks. Love, love. After replying, you stuffed your face with Bakugou's cooking before your phone lit up one last time. You've done a lot of thinking, so time to live a little. Maybe it's not meant to last, but I say it's better to say you tried than say you did nothing. Do you want to look back a couple of years from now and regret not making a move? If you're okay with that, then keep going. But if you think there's any chance he might say yes, then jump. I'm too tired for this today. Why are feelings so complicated? You put your phone away and finished eating, pondering her words yet again. You'd been debating on this all week, and if you didn't make a decision soon, it would be too late. Bakugou couldn't wait for you forever. Literally. Ultimately, you decided to feel things out today. You'd pay close attention to his behavior after work to see how he reacted to your words and actions. Nonverbal body language could say a lot, and you'd watched enough terrible romantic comedies to pick up on common social cues. A couple of hours later, someone chatted you that there were cupcakes in the kitchen. You immediately jumped out of your chair and headed that way. Yes, please, something sweet. I wonder if Bakugou likes cupcakes. As you neared the counter, you saw a group of people already gathered around the display. Chocolate and vanilla cupcakes with frosting opposite their cake flavors. There were more than enough for everyone on the floor, so they wouldn't mind if you took one of each, right? You weren't the only one with that same idea, so you grabbed 2 cupcakes before walking back to your desk. It was tempting to taste one of them, but letting Bakugou choose which one he wanted while you took the leftover cupcake seemed like the nice thing to do. If he didn't like cupcakes, well, that just meant you could eat both. Win-win. When it was time to head home, you packed up your things, grabbed the cupcakes, and hurried down the hall and out the door. So ready to sleep in tomorrow, no alarm, no work. You wondered what Bakugou got himself up to today, even though it probably wasn't so different from what he did the rest of the week. If you could do something to keep Bakugou busy, you would, even if it meant sacrificing your weekend. You entered into an oddly quiet apartment once you opened the door and closed it behind you. No cooking food, no video games, no shower. Just silence. Thinking you'd find a note sitting on the counter, you slid the cupcakes into the fridge and looked around, only to find the countertop and table empty of notes, aside from the one you left this morning. Weird, you said to yourself, before a swift and horrifying thought punched you right in the gut. What if he was gone? The idea of Bakugou disappearing while you were at work made you stiffen before your feet slid out from under you. It felt like a cold gust of wind, chilly and devoid of warmth, spread through your chest and into your veins. You felt like you were going to throw up as your head started swimming. After standing up and regaining a bit of balance, you walked over to the hall closet where he kept the clothes you bought. His things were still there, folded and tidy. The blanket he used was draped neatly across the couch as well. Shit, how long has he been here? You took out your phone with shaky hands and counted the days on your calendar. 9, 10 days. 10 days seemed like the perfect amount of time before a quirk would wear off. Your breath quickened, but you attempted to control it with little luck. Throwing your phone on the couch, you ran into your room and bent down to pull out the pillow where he'd originally sprung from. It was still blank, white and bare as if no image had existed there at all. If he went back, would he appear back on here or... Oh, fuck. Damn it. You felt so stupid thinking you had more time, that you could build up the courage and tell him how you felt when you were ready and before it was too late. Now, you'd never have the chance. A stinging pressure started to build behind your eyes as your breaths came unevenly and your friend's words echoed back to you. Will you regret it if you don't jump? No, shit. Calm down. Don't panic. You told yourself before stuffing the pillow back under the bed. Changing clothes into something more comfortable helped calm you down, but only slightly. Passing by your closet, you paused as your brain latched onto hypothetical possibilities and scenarios. This was the first time you'd been alone in your apartment in almost a week, wasn't it? Should I... Turning on the light, you dug in the back of your closet for a duffel bag and pulled out the My Hero Academia season box sets you'd hidden. If he'd found them by now, things definitely would have gone to shit, so maybe this was your opportunity to get rid of any evidence in your apartment. Besides, after all this, you'd never be able to think about him in the same context again. Reading the manga and watching the anime would feel awkward if nothing else, right? Grabbing the DVDs, you stuffed them into a grocery bag, slid on some flip-flops, and looked both ways down the hallway to make sure the coast was clear before jogging down to the garbage chute at the end of your floor. Goodbye, evidence. Have fun at the dump. You let out a shaky breath and dropped the bag, listening to it clang down the metal chute until nothing but silence echoed back. At least now there was nothing in your apartment to alert Bakugou to his true existence here, which eased your nerves just a bit more. If he came back, when he came back, there'd be no problems. Once you walked back through the front door, though, the empty apartment stared back at you, taunting and prodding as if to mock you. You could be overreacting for nothing. Maybe he wasn't gone at all and just lost track of time outside or got distracted. You closed your eyes and took several deep breaths in another attempt to calm yourself. After plugging up your phone to charge, you took out a broom and dustpan, some gloves, and various cleaners. You had to keep yourself distracted with something to keep moving before the anxiety swallowed you whole. You wiped down the counters and stove. You put away any stray dishes left in the drying rack. You swept the kitchen, living room, bathroom, and your bedroom. You organized your things in the bathroom, pausing to look at the shampoo and soap Bakugou had been using. Would you just throw them away when he was gone? If he was gone? You shook your head free of the thought before continuing on your cleaning spree until your head felt dizzy from chemical fumes. About an hour had passed by the time you finished cleaning. Nearly everything was spotless and smelled overwhelmingly like store-bought cleaner, so you lit your new candle to help a bit with the odor. What now? It still felt so lonely in the apartment without Bakugou. Looking back at the door, you grabbed your phone and the book you'd been reading on and off and plopped down on the couch. The thought of fixing dinner made your stomach roll. You scrolled through Twitter and Instagram since Bakugou kept you busy and off your phone most of the time, which was actually a pleasant change of pace considering how most people stuck to social media like moths to a flame. Glancing up from your screen, you saw the hall closet door and wondered what you'd do with Bakugou's clothes. Would you throw them away like his bathroom items? Donate them? Both thoughts made you cringe. Just keep waiting, don't panic, you told yourself, while only half believing your own words. You tried to read your book, but after a few minutes, the words blurred together and you threw it to the side in frustration. The silence was driving you crazy, so you grabbed your phone and headphones and turned the volume up until your ears were ringing as you selected your favorite playlist. Music often calmed you down and distracted you. As the beat started up, you closed your eyes and drowned yourself in the sound, letting the guitar and drums vibrate in your chest and under your skin. Intensely focused on the music, you started to sing, eyes still closed, and your arms wrapped around a pillow on the couch as you leaned your head back and filled the apartment with your voice. The determination to drown out your thoughts and the silence worked so well, in fact, that you failed to hear the front door open and close quietly. Bakugou stood in the hallway still as a statue as he let himself listen. It was the first time he'd heard you sing outside of the shower, and the acoustics of the bathroom didn't idealize the sound. He still thought it sounded beautiful. Not wanting to interrupt, he gave himself this one selfish indulgence and immediately didn't alert you to his return. After another minute, your voice faded away, and Bakugou assumed the song was over. He watched you take your headphones off and stand up from the couch, only to scream and jump back as though you'd seen a damn ghost. Even Bakugou, who was used to sudden noises and surprises by friends and villains alike, was taken aback by your reaction. You held your hand over your heart while you stared at him. Oh, holy shit, you scared the hell out of me. He didn't think you'd freak out at his reappearance. His plan to preserve the calm atmosphere now tossed out the window. You found yourself dramatically as he lifted a brow before you looked at him with an oddly relieved expression.
You okay?
He asked before you grabbed your phone and walked closer. I am now. Sorry for screaming. You kind of scared me. Thought someone broke in for a second. you explained. Oh, so that's why you looked relieved. You thought he was a burglar or stranger. Without a quirk or a solid way to defend yourself against an attacker, besides that baseball bat you threatened him with on his first day here, Bakugou saw how that could be a bit scary. You didn't leave a note, so I wasn't sure when you'd be back. He watched you shift from one foot to the other, unsure of how to read your body language. Are you hungry? I haven't eaten dinner yet. Bakugou inwardly winced at the fact that he'd forgotten that he'd said several nights ago that he'd cooked dinner after you challenged him about it. A small part of him felt guilty. Bakugou hated feeling like a freeloader who didn't contribute when you'd given him so much.
Yeah, I could eat. And I lost track of time while out. Figured I'd be back before you returned.
It was a roundabout way of apologizing because he rarely apologized for anything, but it satisfied him well enough. Where were you? You opened up the cabinets to stare at a dwindling pantry while Bakugou grabbed himself a glass of water. He didn't miss the curious tone in your voice. He just shrugged his shoulders.
Pretty much what I've been doing since I got here. Trying to keep busy. Working out, walking around, exploring mostly.
The fresh air outside also helped him clear his head to think about everything that had happened up to this point, ranging from his lack of answer surrounding the villain and quirk that brought him here, to your little friendship conversation last night kept his mind busy. You stared into the pantry as if it held solutions to questions he wasn't privy to, before you blinked yourself back to attention and turned to him. Even though he was back, Bakugou could see in the reflection of your eyes that you were hiding stress from an unknown origin. What do you want to eat? Maybe we could order something? There isn't a lot left here, and it's pretty late to start cooking anyway. Plus, I cleaned the kitchen and dirtying it up immediately makes my head hurt. You smiled, but it seemed a bit forced. Now that you mentioned it, Bakugou looked at the now spotless stove and counters. Did you clean while he was away, too?
Shit. I really am useless here. Sure, that's fine.
Agreeing to something simple like takeout seemed like the best course of action. He opened the fridge, something everyone did even when they knew nothing in there would satisfy them, and stopped. 2 cupcakes, 1 vanilla and 1 chocolate, sat on the top shelf. Those definitely weren't there earlier.
Did you bring those?
He asked while turning to you and pointing to the desserts. You visibly brightened up at the question. Yeah, someone at work brought them in. There were more than enough, so I grabbed a couple. I figured you might like one, though I didn't know which flavor you'd like. That is, if you want one, of course. You don't have to eat one. Maybe you don't. Bakugou just stared at you with raised eyebrows until you clamped your mouth shut. You must not have realized you were rambling on about cupcakes and debating on whether or not he'd actually like it. So, yeah. You finished with a bit of nervous laughter. Sweets weren't something he normally gravitated towards, but if it stared him in the face, chances were that he'd at least try it. Plus, he'd never openly admit this, but the gesture was kind of cute.
Thanks.
He grabbed the vanilla cupcake with chocolate frosting and turned to you.
I like sweets well enough, but I prefer spicy things.
Bakugou thought about how much you squirmed at the thought of spicy food and smirked. I mean, spicy is nice sometimes, but not all the time, and your level of spicy seems like a health hazard. His eyes narrowed at your accusation that his taste in food was anything but heavenly.
You're crazy. You can never have enough spice. You just can't enjoy it because your taste buds suck.
How dare you slander spicy food like this? He felt obligated to defend it, if only for the joy of engaging such a stupid argument with you. I don't enjoy the feeling of my mouth being on fire. That doesn't mean my taste buds suck. You crossed your arms defensively, having taken the bait. Bakugou scoffed.
Sounds like they suck to me.
He spat back before taking a bite of the cupcake. It was actually pretty good, not overly sweet. He could cook, but baking was a bit out of his expertise. He'd always wanted to try making bread, though. Yeah, well, just because it's spicy doesn't mean it's good. You walked over and grabbed the remaining cupcake from the fridge before sticking your nose in the air. Maybe you're just numb to real food by now. He stared with his mouth agape as you giggled and stuck your tongue out at him. One of these days, he was going to do something about that tongue of yours. He immediately started choking on his cupcake at the stray thought that vocalized itself in his brain.
The fuck? Where did that come from?
Shit, Bakugou, are you okay? Your voice was laced with mild distress as his coughing fit continued. He turned his back to you quickly and held up a finger, the universal sign to give him a minute. Hardly 10 minutes after walking in the damn door, and Bakugou's thoughts were already wandering into dangerous territory. You slid over his glass of water and, when he could finally breathe, he downed half the glass in a couple of gulps. With his back still to you because he swore his face felt warm, it had nothing to do with the coughing, he said thank you in your language. It took a minute for his breathing to return to a relatively normal pace. Did it go down the wrong way? Bakugou accepted the ready-made excuse you offered and nodded. When he thought he'd calmed down enough to look you in the eyes, he took one more gulp of water and turned around, at exactly the worst time. Some vanilla frosting from your cupcake was smeared on the side of your mouth, so you took your finger, wiped it off, and promptly licked it clean without so much as a glance up at him. Bakugou wasn't sure if he was imagining the movement in slow motion or not, but either way, he almost spat out his water and went into a second coughing fit. Are you sure you're all right? You prodded with a bit more concern this time. He surely looked like some kind of idiot by this point, but he refused to face you as he downed the last of the water in a futile attempt to wash his brain clean of whatever the fuck it was trying to think of. Words failed him again, and he just nodded again. He'd been fine for most of the day. He'd woken up, read your note, and started the routine he'd set up while here. A walk in the cool air helped him feel centered and relaxed, and now it all came quickly undone by your cheekiness and some fucking frosting. Thoughts of last night consumed him, but he'd managed to push them aside while alone. All his hard work seemed to fall apart when you were around. It was starting to drive him crazy. You were starting to drive him crazy. Well, if you're sure, I'm gonna order some food then. Want anything specific? Clearing his throat one last time, he shook his head.
Whatever's fine.
He managed to grit out as he walked over to sit at the kitchen table to sift through a couple of takeout menus piled in the center. He also wanted to sit at the table, but only to bang his head down on it. Maybe he could beat the intrusive thoughts out of his skull. Bakugou ran a hand through his pale blonde hair and sighed while still avoiding eye contact with you. He silently thanked whatever deity in this universe, if there was one, for your obliviousness given the fact that you failed to notice his obvious urge to jump out a window. You listed off a few food choices, but Bakugou didn't care and waved a hand in the air dismissively in a clear, whatever motion. Maybe food could properly distract him from wandering to more unsavory places. Well, if that's the case, Chinese takeout it is then. Your enthusiasm told him how hungry you were, and another small pang of irritation at himself for not having cooked something flared up. But no point in dwelling about it now. He really didn't care what you ordered, but you must have had at least some sense of his food tastes by now. Bakugou noticed that you were basically wiggling with excitement in your chair as you talked on the phone to place the order, like some stupid food dance that only you could come up with. He wondered if you noticed what you were doing at all. A small smile found its way onto his face without him even realizing. While you talked on the phone to the guy on the other end taking your order, you looked over at Bakugou leaning against the counter. He was sort of smiling at you, and damn it if you didn't feel like smiling right back. Things started off rocky when he returned from wherever he was. Then he almost choked on a cupcake, but things had finally calmed down. Acting casual and friendly with him felt good. If you could just keep this pace and not let your words or feet trip you up whenever he did, well, anything, then you'd be fine. Maybe you'd even build up the courage to tell him how you felt before the night was over. Maybe. All right, food is ordered and should be here in about half an hour. We have to go grocery shopping tomorrow, almost out of food. And I'm going to be lazy and sleep in. Don't wake me up unless there's an emergency, no exceptions. You pointed at him as if he'd been your personal alarm for the week when you really were his, accidentally waking him up with your tripping and falling. Relaxing with a full night's sleep also sounded heavenly. The fact that you used we instead of I on the assumption that Bakugou would be here tomorrow flew right over your head. Scoffing, he took another sip of water and folded his arms.
Here I was thinking you were already being lazy.
Sarcasm truly was his second language, considering the fact that he didn't have a job or work while stuck here, despite having a far more exciting life than your own back in his universe. Very funny, smartass. Not all of us have been training, working out, saving people, and doing crazy shit our whole lives, you know. No amount of teasing would prevent you from catching up on your lack of sleep.
I haven't even told you about the interesting stories and missions I've done over the years,
he retorted, with a faraway look in his eyes, as though he were rifling through fond memories. You perked up at his open invitation to tell you about his life. Really? Your excitement wasn't feigned. The anime and manga only covered his first year at UA, so if he had amazing stories as a pro hero, you refused to let the opportunity to learn more about him pass you by. As if drawn in by your enthusiasm, Bakugou sat down across from you and launched into a story of a long and drawn-out battle against a villain. He'd talked briefly about his friends and summarized a few of their quirks by this point. Maybe his ego was showing and jumped at the opportunity to showboat around a bit. He and Kirishima had been chasing a wanted villain for days until they finally managed to corner him. Bakugou's tone shifted with the action, slowing down and dropping lower during the less stressful parts, and picking back up when the action resumed. His eyes never left yours during the story, and he even popped off some sparks with his quirk for emphasis. You were wholly sucked into his retelling, your neck craned forward as you balanced on the edge of your seat with rapt attention. You blinked back to reality, and Bakugou paused with an irritated expression when a knock echoed against your front door. "Oh, that must be the food. Don't forget where you stopped." Hopping out of the chair quickly, you opened the door to find a tired-looking delivery woman holding a plastic bag. Of course it would be busy and exhausting on a Friday night. You signed the receipt and waved her off before bringing the food inside. Bakugou had already gotten down some plates, so you set the bag down and started to divide things up. You slid a box full of spicy food his way, but he picked at your own food anyway because he knew it'd annoy you. He could be such a brat sometimes, but you didn't mind too much.
Since you're obviously not using them.
Bakugou grabbed up a pair of wooden chopsticks from the bag, separating them and placing them in his hand with practiced ease as if to mock you. However, you were so hungry that you dug into your plate without a second thought, swallowing down an indecent sound. The pangs of hunger undoubtedly enhanced the flavor. After the two of you sat and ate for a few minutes, you gestured for Bakugou to continue with his story. So, where did you leave off? Bakugou looked up to see he had your full attention again. Normally, he resented retelling stories of his heroics, finding it annoying as though he were being drilled by the press or meticulously analyzed as a public figure. Right now, though, he felt comfortable. There was no need to rehash or embellish the details from the glistening look in your eyes, as though whatever you expected him to say wasn't as incredible as the real thing. He enjoyed having your undivided focus, but he was too wrapped up in memories to realize it. When he finished the story, he and Kirishima obviously won with a grandiose display. Bakugou took a triumphant bite of food.
Dumbass villain. Didn't know what hit him.
Your bright smile reminded him of the same one you gave him last night. That was amazing! The way you two... it's so cool! You and Kiri make such a good team! Bakugou picked up immediately on one particular detail through your excitement.
Kiri?
He asked. You looked taken aback at him questioning shortening the name of his best friend, whom you'd never met before you cleared your throat. Well, you don't use his name too often, and it's a little hard to remember, so I just shortened it in my head. Does it bother you? He watched you squirm a bit in your chair as though afraid you'd offended him. Bakugou wasn't entirely comfortable with you giving Kirishima a nickname like that. Japanese culture used specific ways to address different people, as he'd explained a bit earlier in the week, and shortening Kirishima's name when you'd never shortened his own made his eye twitch slightly. But you weren't exactly versed in the intricacies of another culture, and your reasoning made sense, so he'd let it slide this time.
Just call him Kirishima,
he answered, before taking another bite of food and shrugging it off. You nodded in understanding and seemed to relax a bit. Sure, sorry, I'll be sure to remember. Do you have any other cool stories of you and your friends being badass? Smirking, Bakugou let his pride get in the way once again. He found that he didn't mind telling you stories that seemed, to you, far more impressive than they were in reality.
A lot more.
You lit up like a Christmas tree, and Bakugou felt his pulse race under his skin when you leaned forward on the table. Can you tell me another? You reminded him of a puppy begging for treats, and who was he to deny you entertainment when it made him look good? With a nod, he launched into another story about a villain he took out with Kaminari and Asui. The three of them tracked her to a nature reserve filled with rare and protected plants and species. Tactical care had to be taken to avoid unnecessary damage. Oh, it must have been difficult when your quirk is literally explosions, you stated, completely absorbed into the story. Bakugou just scoffed.
Not when you have a mastery over it and don't act stupidly.
Once again, he let a few sparks loose from his palm and watched your eyes light up, the gold and yellow lights reflected in them like small fireworks. Because they all went to school together, the three of them knew how to utilize each other's quirks effectively to capture the villain and turn her into the authorities. Once he finished, you sat back in your chair and sighed, staring at him with an unfamiliar longing. Wow, you work with so many cool people and do amazing things. You held up your own hands and stared at them as though hoping a quirk of your own might appear if you wished hard enough. My life is pretty bland in comparison. He waved off the comment with a flick of his wrist.
I've never had someone from another damn universe appear in my bedroom before, so you have that on me.
A lot of crazy things had happened in his lifetime, sure, but his current dilemma topped pretty much all of them for most bizarre. You just laughed at that and scratched the back of your neck. Yeah, I guess, but in your world, it's literally a possibility. Here, I'm just the lucky woman who wound up with you. Without a second to spare, he watched your face transform from sheepish to mortified. What I mean is, He zeroed in on your phrasing, the word lucky standing out quite clearly. You fidgeted, nervousness at the slip now blatantly obvious.
Lucky, huh?
He was in a good mood, and honestly, after he looked like a complete moron earlier choking on a damn cupcake, he decided to play along and goad you into an explanation, curiosity getting the better of him. Avoiding eye contact, you attempted to stammer out an answer. What I mean is, lucky for the opportunity. To meet you, of course. I imagine I'm the only one in this world who has ever met someone with a quirk before, so it's like, historic. He watched your babbling with far too much amusement for his own good as you waved your hands around distractedly. Bakugou didn't buy that explanation for a second. The answer, the phrasing, the wild gestures, culminating in the fact that you were practically sweating in your seat. It all screamed of bullshit. He leaned forward on the table and smirked.
So, you're lucky because I'm one of a kind?
He asked with a shit-eating grin that you would have seen had you been looking at him. The way your hands fidgeted, obviously nervous to let the truth slip out, was honestly kind of cute. As Bakugou waited for an answer, something in his brain clicked, which made his smile falter. What the fuck was he doing? He'd just told himself last night that this couldn't happen, that he wasn't going to treat you differently, that he'd shove whatever stupid feelings he'd realized deep down into a sunless pit. And now? What, he was acting flirty? Bakugou's ears burned with the realization when you made an odd noise that brought his attention back to you. You slapped your hand over your mouth as a loud hiccup forced you to literally bounce in your seat. Chancing a glance up at him, you pulled your hands away before another hiccup echoed in the room. It had all been going so well, until you stuck your foot in your mouth by practically admitting to Bakugou how lucky you felt to have met him and that he was special. To top it all off, now you had the hiccups. You only ever got them when you were extremely stressed. Why now, of all times, and not earlier when he wasn't here? Another hiccup made you jump again.
Do you have hiccups?
He asked warily. Gone was his borderline flirty attitude and confidence, which was now replaced by a look of bewilderment. You slowly pulled your hands away from your mouth. I get them sometimes. You managed to get out before hiccuping again. He didn't need to know why you had the hiccups, so you tried to avoid letting one more thing slip. Excuse me. You practically bolted from the kitchen and ran into the bathroom, shutting the door with a snap. Bakugou let his head drop to the table with a heavy sigh and an inaudible groan. He'd been so occupied enjoying the conversation that he didn't realize what he was doing. How often had that happened before? Analyzing whether or not any of that was good or bad felt beyond him at the moment. As soon as you were safely hidden in the bathroom, you turned on the faucet in a pitiful attempt to mask your hiccups and let yourself freak out as embarrassment flooded your entire body. Slapping your hands on your face, you wanted to scream, but only a hiccup came out instead. How the hell were you supposed to get rid of these? Normally, you just waited it out, but at this rate, with Bakugou just outside, you felt hopeless. Now that you were alone with your thoughts in the bathroom, however, you thought back to the conversation. Had Bakugou actually been flirting with you? Or were you just viewing the situation through rose-colored glasses, eager to see what you wanted to see? The way he spoke, showed off his quirk, smiled at you, even stared at you. None of that was just your imagination. Tonight's conversation felt different than any other you'd had with him so far. Maybe he was just oblivious to how he was acting? No, he seemed too smart and self-aware for that. You had no idea what to think, honestly. I'm so screwed, you whispered to yourself in the mirror. While you were locked in the bathroom, Bakugou pulled himself together and started to clean up dinner, an easy distraction. He silently asked himself what Kirishima of all people might do in this situation. Bakugou rarely ever asked for advice, confident in his own decision-making and judgments. But he was out of his element with this whole whatever it was. Kirishima would probably say something like,
"Man, just go for it. The manliest thing you can do is live your life without regrets."
His thoughts were interrupted when he heard another loud hiccup from the bathroom. Damn it. Then a devious idea struck him like a slap across the face. It surely would have been suggested by Kaminari. It would either work perfectly and the two of you might be forced to confront something, or you'd be pissed at him with angry hiccups. At this point, he wasn't sure which was worse, but fuck it. Bakugou grabbed your phone that you'd left on the table and stood outside the bathroom door with his free hand raised. When you opened the door a minute later, Bakugou immediately popped off his quirk in an attempt to scare the hiccups out of you. You screamed and jumped back, falling right on your ass as a result. He knew it made him look like a giant asshole, but the terrified look on your face forced a sudden laugh out of him. He held out your phone to translate once you finally sat up with your hand over your heart for the second time that day. It reminded him of how dramatic you looked when he came back earlier, except this time, rather than relief, your face contorted into annoyance. You asshole! Scaring me twice in one day? You tried to kick him in the shin, but he lifted his leg easily to avoid the blow. It wouldn't have hurt anyway. There was one question he needed answered now to know if it was worth it.
Are your hiccups gone?
You opened your mouth to possibly yell at him again when you paused, and waited. No hiccups. Holy shit, I think they are. You breathed with a bit of amazement. Narrowing your eyes, you returned to looking exasperated. I'm only half thanking you, though.
Fair,
Bakugou thought, but his good mood was slowly returning, and he didn't want to let it go.
Wow, how grateful you are. I could just leave you on the floor, you know.
Taking a step away from the bathroom, his brows raised when you called out to him. Wait, just... fine. Help me up, it's the least you could do. You held out your hand expectantly, wiggling your fingers. Not many people could keep him on his toes, but your bold attitude was the rare exception. He didn't actually plan on leaving you there anyway, since it was his fault in the first place. Reaching out a hand, you grabbed it and he easily lifted you back up to your feet. His hand felt warm in yours, his grip strong and comforting. He lifted you as though it was no problem at all, which it probably wasn't considering he literally carried you off to bed the previous night. Now that you stood on your own 2 feet, you realized how close you were to him, but attempted to remain calm. He hadn't let go of your hand yet, and the smirk on his face made him look painfully handsome.
Glad my plan worked. Those hiccups looked kind of painful.
You managed to nod in response. They, can be, sometimes. You stammered out. Bakugou finally let go of your hand, and the lack of warmth was almost jarring. Rather than avoid eye contact, you stared at him, drawn to the intensity of his ruby eyes. They looked kind of strange, as though you could see an idea bouncing back and forth reflected in them. In that moment, you felt your heart beating in your chest and thought, "Now, tell him now." The moment seemed perfect, with the two of you standing there so close together in heavy silence. You opened your mouth to speak and let loose the words you'd been debating over the past few days, but stopped when Bakugou took a step back, away from you. It was small, but you caught it. That small step stomped on your brief surge of confidence, and your throat closed as though plagued by the prick of venom. Immediately, your brain flew into overdrive with self-deprecating ideas. Were you making him uncomfortable? Did he know you had a crush on him and wanted to keep his distance? Then why flirt? Was he flirting? What if...
Oi, come back down to earth.
Bakugou waved a hand in front of your face. You must have zoned out, staring off into space with him still right in front of you. Oh, sorry. I should get ready for bed, probably. It was a pitiful excuse, but it was the best you could come up with, an urge to be alone and out of sight overcoming you. You stepped past him, mindful of keeping the distance he set, and walked towards the kitchen. The dishes were put away and boxes of takeout were nowhere to be seen. Did you clean up? You didn't have to, but thanks. Turning around to glance at him was hard, but you did it anyway. Gone was his smirk from earlier. The air felt heavy between the two of you, as if his single step back pushed him 100 steps away.
Sure,
was all he said with a shrug. With your phone still in your hand, you projected, not wanting to step closer to retrieve it just yet. I'll be back in a few minutes. Your footsteps felt like lead as you padded through the living room and into your bedroom, where you softly closed the door behind you with a click. With Bakugou's gaze no longer on you, the insecurity you'd done so well to drown with the help of your friend bubbled back to the surface. Did you do something wrong? He hadn't seemed insulted or put out when you let slip how lucky you were to meet him. On the contrary, his tone suggested amusement if nothing else. Was he just teasing you, and you'd read too far between the lines to see what you wanted to see? Bakugou didn't seem like the type of guy to just lead someone on for no reason. But without an answer, all you were left with were questions. Bakugou watched your door close and immediately bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted the familiar tang of iron. The way you'd been looking at him, and how reluctant he was to actually let go of your hand pushed him so damn close to opening up with foolish honesty. He had to physically back away from you to bring himself back to reality, and he didn't miss the perplexed expression on your face afterwards. What the hell was wrong with him? He'd never acted this way back home. Fans and strangers alike threw themselves at him, desperate for attention, but he always brushed right past them without a second glance. Relationships were a distraction from hero work and, in the worst-case scenario, could be used against him by a cunning villain. But now you were the distraction, making his mind wander and his ears burn. What was the point in starting something that could never turn into anything? And what about you? Had he been so selfishly wrapped up in his own emotional struggles that he failed to consider how his reactions affected you? It was beyond obvious from the conversation tonight that you had a damn crush on him, so what the fuck was he doing about it? By the time you opened your door, Bakugou realized he hadn't moved from his spot in front of the bathroom, too lost in thought to bother. You cleared your throat and pointed to the bathroom, making him realize he still held your phone in his hand. He studied you briefly as you walked past him, your posture reserved and eyes unreadably foggy. He listened when he heard the shower start up and wondered if he'd hear you sing again, but you didn't. Taking that as a bad sign, he set your phone down on the table and sunk into the couch. Whatever was on your mind was intense enough to stop you from doing the one thing he expected of you. Bakugou felt the need to put his thoughts down on paper. Maybe that would help sort things out. Pulling out the notes he'd hidden under the couch cushion, he started to write, letting the ink flow with his thoughts. While scribbling, Bakugou heard your phone buzz on the table, but ignored it. Your private conversations were none of his concern. Your phone vibrated 4 more times before he finished writing, and he'd be lying if he said he wasn't at least a little tempted to see who the hell wanted your attention so badly. It wasn't as though he had the passcode to your phone, anyway, or could easily read the messages. He often lacked privacy back home with his public life and wasn't about to invade yours. He scoffed and continued to write, making a list of pros and cons, to follow whatever the hell the thumping in his chest was telling him to do, or continue ignoring it to leave things as they were. But he wasn't stupid enough to believe that. While he wouldn't act on anything consciously, he might slip up like he had tonight. Bakugou asked himself, if he met you back home under completely normal circumstances, would he feel the same way he did now? Or was this just a product of the situation at hand, being stuck with you the past 10 days, where he would have normally ignored you like he did all the others? The list read as such.
Pros. 1. Fucking cute, damn it. 2. Makes me laugh. What the fuck? 3. Generous and kind without asking for anything in return. 4. I want to impress you. 5. Good smile. 6. I like when you're happy. Fuck. 7. Good taste in music. 8. Gives me shit if I'm an ass. 9. Good singing voice. 10. Want to protect you. Cons. 1. Nothing can last. Temporary. Going home. Eventually. 2. Is she having the same debate? Worth it to even try?
The only reason your shower was taking so long was that you were, in fact, having the same inner debate as Bakugou. Your list was mental, though. The biggest boulder standing in your path remained the fact that you had no idea how he felt about you. Tonight, you made such a fool of yourself that your feelings must have been glaringly obvious, but Bakugou was much better at hiding his emotions and thoughts. At times, you felt sure he at least felt something for you, even if it was just friendship. But when he took that step back, your resolve crumbled. His stoicism confused you to no end. You couldn't deny that feeling as though he was pushing you away hurt like the sting of a paper cut. With a sigh, You stepped out of the shower before you started to resemble a prune. Can't stay in here forever, I guess. You walked out of the bathroom, a bit of steam following after you, to see Bakugou on the couch. A pile of notes sat in front of him, much like the ones you'd seen days ago. He looked frustrated and deep in thought, but when he looked up at you, his expression softened. Again, you wanted to ask about the things he wrote, but now especially felt like the wrong time. The air was still tense, though at least not as much as before your shower. Hey, phone? You made a typing gesture with your hands, and Bakugou seemed to understand, pointing silently over to the table before folding up his papers. It seemed like he didn't want you to read them anyway. It was best not to pry. Grabbing your phone from the table, you saw you had quite a few texts from your friend, all asking various questions of, "What's happening, OMG?" and "You guys better be kissing and touching butts or I will come over there." "Shit," you whispered. She was exactly the type of person to drive all the way across town as a final act of defiance against your self-pity party. Your fingers hovered over your virtual keyboard while thinking of a response when Bakugou's voice broke the silence.
You okay?
He asked in your language. He seemed to ask if you were okay quite a lot recently. Mulling over his reasons for concern just made you feel even more tense. You pulled up the translator app with shaky fingers. Yeah, fine. Just my friend being dumb is all. You attempted to play it off with a strained laugh. I think I'm going to bed. Let me know if you need anything. Good night, Bakugou. Your eyes lingered on him one last time, as cowardice and self-doubt told you to flee to the isolated safety of your bedroom.
Oyasumi,
he said, in a softer voice than he intended. The look you gave him was, for once, unreadable. Your normally expressive eyes and gestures were now languid and inert. It didn't suit you. Bakugou's fist closed around the folded list he'd made, crumpling the paper with all your good qualities. No answer came to him on what path to take, but this couldn't go on much longer. Fighting villains was easy, but this required more tact and consideration. He didn't want to hurt you or lead you on, but it still sounded absurdly stupid to start something that already had an unknown end date. Tomorrow, if he woke up on your fucking couch again, he'd choose. No more of this teenage bullshit. Meanwhile, you flopped down onto your bed with a groan as you typed out a response to your friend. We aren't kissing. The exact opposite. Pretty sure I put my foot in my mouth and screwed up. Do not come over here. I just need time to think. You desperately needed rest. Maybe the sleep deprivation from the previous night caught up to you without you realizing it. Closing your eyes and nuzzling into the cool sheets of your bed, a sudden impulse hit you to lean down and grab the stuffed animal Bakugou had won at the amusement park. You hadn't cuddled like this in many years, but at this point, any comfort sounded welcoming. Maybe you can help me figure things out, you whispered to the stuffed animal, hugging it tightly to your chest as you drifted off to sleep. Tomorrow would be a new day for both of you. Someone had to give, one way or another. Your phone alarm was currently the most annoying sound. It certainly is. Wow. Right off the bat. Okay. Okay. His eyes narrowed at your accusation that his taste in food was anything. Anything? Well, if you're sure, I'm gonna. This beeping is non-stop. Goddamn. He waved off the comment with a flick of his wrist. Look at the flick of the wrist. Look at the flick of the wrist. Sorry. Bakugou rarely asked for advice. I lost my place. Bakugou rarely. Oh, there we go. Jesus. Damn it. my lord. We aren't kissing. The exact opposite. Pretty sure I put my foot in my mouth and I can't read the words right. We aren't kissing. The exact opposite. Pretty sure I foot my mouth and my put and stuff.